Hello, this is an assessment for reconditioning of a Knight K10 made in 1959. This style of Knight K10 is relatively common, one of the commonest styles, going up to about 1970 I think. And just zeroing in here, we can see straight away there's a key that's below the other keys, this key over here. And we can also see the back rail felt. I don't think that's the original, and it looks like it might be a bit moth-eaten here. You can see that. Then you have to look in the piano to see if there's any other moth damage as well. Casework-wise, it's reasonable except for this patch here, which hopefully with cutting it back we should be able to get rid of most of that. As with all Knights of this age, you see that the casters jut out of the back. That's because the frame is so heavy. Immensely stable pianos, and something we try to stock ourselves because they're incredibly stable. And you can see the caster there has had to be offset because the frame's so heavy, otherwise the piano sort of tends to topple over backwards. Now, totally coincidentally, in our showroom here, we have exactly the same model of piano, made in 1970, I believe, and as you can see, almost exactly the same casework, so it didn't change very much. The name Knight is slightly different here, you can see, but similar. It's kind of like transferred on rather than embossed metal, so it's a good quality piano though. There's a later Knight K10 in stock, and there's more clean lines, as you can see, simpler casework. This is something we used to be able to buy in the trade, but not sure if there's any left now. If we had the Knight name was not quite right. This is 1978. And before we look at some of the things we need to do to the piano, this label inside is interesting. It's in a lot of Knights of this age. It's recommended that the instrument be fitted with a damp chaser. Now, a damp chaser is a metal bar that heats up, put in the bottom of the piano to try and chase the damp. It's a good idea actually, but most centrally heated houses don't need them. But if you've got problem with humidity, then obviously a good idea. And Knights sold right around the world. They're extremely international manufacturer. American customers may obtain damp chasers as well. Just want to look at some styles of Knight. So here's an old Knight brochure, and this one here is the Knight K10, 1966, as you can see, this brochure. And very similar looking piano here. Bit of a description about it there. I'll hold it there so you can stop the video if you want to read it, and then we'll go down, have a look at some of the other Knights. Now, that's one of the more common ones. This is with cabriole legs, not very common at all. This is more what we would tend to call American style. This has got a drop action, so we don't buy drop action pianos unless we get them in part exchange, but I think this talks about a drop action somewhere. I'll just have a look. Yes, it does here. I haven't got time to talk about a drop action. We occasionally get one in because it's a part exchange piano, but don't deliberately buy them in. They're difficult to work on. Unfortunately, we've got enough Knights that are not drop action to have. There's just some of the other ones. I don't want to spend too long on this. The K6, K20 coming up here. That's just slightly shorter, not that much shorter. You can see the dimensions there, by the way. There's the K6, that's the K20, I beg your pardon. There's the K10. I'm not doing this in a very logical order, I'm sure. Sorry, the American one here, 37, I think that's the shortest, and then we've got one down here, what's that, 40 inches. So just a brief look at that. Now this key top here has actually been stuck back on too far back, and this one too. Actually, this came off when I was taking the keys out to look underneath. And looking underneath the keys, there is evidence of moth, but fortunately they haven't destroyed and if you look at, normally you can tell moth as well because keys aren't level very often because they've eaten the middle rail here, and that causes the keys. I've taken the keys out and haven't got time to show you. Just well, maybe I'll show you one or two. Sorry, this was a bit rushed. There was a key. That's obviously a case key or something like that, isn't it? And you can see the evidence of moth here, but they haven't destroyed the felts. You can see they're beginning to eat into them. So these obviously will affect the key dip if they eat into those a lot. So you certainly need to treat for moth that it obviously doesn't spread and come back. But the centre rail, right the way along, we found there's all these totally intact. So whether somebody had changed them all, that's a possibility. But you can still see the eggs here, so I'm not quite sure what's happened there. And we also saw, actually that might be eggs, might be droppings. It's mostly droppings you find in pianos. And here we have the dampers also, you can see on there, lot of evidence of moth. So of course early, and since they don't know what happened, but they didn't end up destroying the piano, which very often does happen. There's no bearing cloth on this piano, top and bottom, so that's not there, that won't be destroyed. There's this centre here also hasn't been destroyed, but there are some that are worn. You can see on the left hand side of this one, that's quite worn, and that's quite common on a lot of pianos. So let's just see which one that is. So there's middle G, and you can see on the left hand side, so it wobbles sideways, from side to side. There we are. Not a huge amount of wobble, but it does wobble from side to side. So if you're fully reconditioning a piano, you'd change those. Obviously there's a budget probably involved in this, so we'll have to decide. There are ways of sort of opening it up as well a bit, but ideally change the left hand side anyway on that. It's very commonly done. Just going back to here, that's holding up because of the key we talked about earlier, but there's quite a lot of wear on this piano. We just have a look at the hammers. You can see there, that's clearly a lot of indentation. Sorry, I can't focus it. There we are. A lot of indentation on these hammers. So I need refacing to get the proper tone back. And there's a variety of indentation, as though they might have been moved over. Sometimes if they're loose, which they aren't in this case, if the hammers are loose, then they'll move sideways. But these aren't loose, actually. The Knight's so well made, you don't tend to go loose. But they must have perhaps been put back on in a slightly different place to make the end of them look different there. I've got to say the back rail here has also got evidence of moth. And again, it's still quite level, so they haven't really damaged it terribly badly. The piano obviously has been worked on, because with the amount of hammer wear, you'd expect more lost motion than that. There is a bit of lost motion on some of them, but that one there's got no lost motion, and with the amount the hammer's worn, you'd have a lot of lost motion as well. So that's been clearly worked on. So not quite sure what work's been done. The damper regulation's reasonably well. It's not that good. One of those is a bit early, really. So there's quite a lot of regulation. As I say, it's going to be quite costly if the amount of work we do on this piano ourselves is we change all the felts if it's got that much moth damage. Well, probably not the hammer rail felt here, but certainly treat them all as well. Fortunately, the damper felts are fine. So again, just treat it, make sure the moth's dead and not going to come alive again. So these tapes are looking good, actually, so that's encouraging. There are some positive things to say about it, and the pitch is roughly, it's about 2 beats flat of A440, and the tone is typically nice night tone. It's a bit ringy, that one. I don't know whether if we twisted one of the strings that would improve that. And these dampers are a bit early. The damper springs are quite heavy, really. So, well, say if it's a stock piano, we do all that work, but it'll be quite expensive to do. These dampers are far too early as well. As you can see, they're coming off early, so that it makes the notes feel heavy, much heavier than they should do. You do need strong damper springs in the bass, but it can come off later than that. So that's an assessment for reconditioning of this Knight K10 made in 1959, and it's being moved from A to B, and we offer a assessment for restoration on its way through, and this one definitely could do with work. Now, it has a typical beautiful tone of a Knight, but the action, first thing I'm noticing playing it, the damping being uneven, especially round here, is quite heavy, so that's causing the touch to feel heavy. And varied. This is obviously just a small repair. The key tops, when this key top's come off, so that we can do. It's been used quite a lot. I think this piano is a bit too used for one that we wouldn't normally take a piano out of this into stock, because there's just too much work. And in fact, there is a lot of work that would improve this piano. So I'll try and put the work in order of importance, and obviously the Moth comes first, making sure that that's dead and won't damage the piano anymore. And then it's a beautiful tone. Just as, even though the hammers need refacing, it's still beautiful. A bit indistinct here because of the refacing needed. Obviously changing this felt is something will make it look better cosmetically. Amazingly, the Moths haven't damaged the felt under the keys too much. so they're still reasonably level, and the key dip is about right. Listen to that tenor. That's why we like Knights so much. Knights and Wellmars are the two main makes we try to get into stock. A solid bass. Thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry, I just realised that I might frustrate some of our subscribers, and if you're watching this, to look at more, because I haven't shown more of the brochure. So here's very quickly the whole brochure. I'll try and show you. Now this is the construction of the Knight frame. Their important characteristic is that they don't have a break in the bridge here. I'll show you what they say about that themselves. So here in this text here, Knight designers have dispensed with the bar brace in the treble section, and in so doing eliminated the bad notes which normally occur on each side of the treble brake bar. Now that's true that very often they occur. Some makes like Wellmar, which we also very much favour, don't seem to have any problem with that, but other makes, I won't give a bad name to any of them at the moment, but definitely if you're a tuner and technician, you'll know that that's the case. So that's why, one of the reasons why Knight's so special, but there's many other aspects too. The pin block is amazing, so stable on the tuning, certainly the most of all uprights. If you put number one for stability, I think you probably agree with me, Knight would be number one, closely followed by Wellmar, another very good make. So obviously they're not the only one, but they are so stable. Showing you briefly, I hope you can stop the video if you want to have a look at something particularly, but many things that they mention here, general comments, but I wanted to particularly point that out. There's the Knight factory. I went there just before it closed. These ones have just come out when this 1966 brochure was made, and certainly they're beautiful casework on this. So we've had some of these in before, particularly like the wood, and the styling is slightly different, as you can see. And we've already looked at the other side here, that style, that's the piano that we were assessing, and then the American style Knights, which we occasionally get in. As I mentioned, we don't deliberately buy drop actions in if we can help it. Well, we can help it, we don't buy them in, but we do get them in part exchange. There's a K6, not so common. K20 is the next most common after K10 in the UK. Well, those K20s though have got sort of that styling, I've always called American styling. It's a bit generalised to say that, but generally that styling's not been that popular in the UK. I just say here is style for the American market, so I wasn't completely wrong there. I hope that's been helpful.